And through a series of acts such as the Equalities Act and the Human Rights Act, the Bribery Act, they've actually undermined the sovereignty of Parliament. And as you say, they have empowered, and the Human Rights Act, which basically removes our control, because the Human Rights Act embeds the European Convention on Human Rights. Yeah. They have the monarch, obviously, as the titular head, and then you have the Lords guiding the Commons. So ultimately, the omnipotent house should be the Commons.
The UK government has successfully deported just 36 foreign national criminals convicted of child sexual abuse or exploitation since 2015. This shocking statistic was at the heart of Rupert Lowe's recent confrontation in the House of Commons. Lowe's questioning went further, suggesting that the true number of victims in the rape gang scandal could be in the millions. As the gravity of these figures sank in, emotions ran high, culminating in tears from one MP. But do these numbers tell the whole story? Rupert Lowe's entrance into the House of Commons sent ripples through the usually placid waters of parliamentary decorum. His presence alone seemed to challenge the status quo, but it was his relentless questioning that truly set the stage for a confrontation that would leave many squirming in their seats. Lowe, known for his no-nonsense approach to politics, came armed with a barrage of questions that cut straight to the heart of the grooming gang crisis. His background as a businessman and former MEP had clearly shaped his direct style.
We've been living, in my view, in what I call a reverse Darwinian world. So since the 70s and the 80s, I mean, post-war, us, the Anglo-Saxon hegemony, us in America, basically ran the world. The last 15 years trying to sort of make myself lower key. And, you know, I was just beginning to get to the stage where Parliament has been undermined, you know, largely by the work of Blair, Brown, Campbell and Mandelson, with the help of Derry Irvine, who you probably remember was their legal advisor.
And he wasn't about to let political niceties get in the way of uncovering the truth. As Lowe began his interrogation, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted palpably. Gone were the usual parliamentary platitudes and carefully crafted responses. Instead, Lowe's rapid-fire questions demanded straight answers on issues that had long been swept under the rug. He challenged the government's commitment to tackling the crisis head-on, questioning their resolve in the face of mounting evidence. One of Lowe's most pointed inquiries centered on the government's willingness to take decisive action. He asked whether they would consider pausing all Pakistani visas and foreign aid until the Pakistani government agreed to accept deported citizens involved in these heinous crimes. The question hung in the air, met with uncomfortable silence from those who usually had ready answers for everything. But Lowe wasn't finished. He pressed further, questioning the government's commitment to stripping citizenship from dual nationals implicated in these offenses. His insistence on accountability and transparency was a stark contrast to the usual parliamentary dance of words and evasions. As the questioning continued, the discomfort among other MPs became increasingly evident. Lowe's direct approach was forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths they'd long avoided. The usual political spin seemed woefully inadequate in the face of such straightforward demands for action. Perhaps the most revealing aspect of this parliamentary showdown was not just Lowe's questions, but the government's hesitancy to provide clear answers. Each non-response and evasion only served to paint a more disturbing picture of systemic failure in addressing the grooming gang crisis. Lowe's confrontational style reached its peak when he declared, "The mass rape of young white working-class girls by gangs of Pakistani rapists is a rotting stain on our nation. This is not about Elon Musk. This is about the victims and ensuring swift and brutal justice is delivered to those demons responsible." His words cut through the usual parliamentary euphemisms, laying bare the horror of the situation in stark terms. Sarah Champion's tearful response to Rupert Lowe's questioning has ignited a firestorm of debate within the Labour Party and beyond. As a long-standing advocate for victims of grooming gangs, Champion's emotional display in Parliament caught many by surprise. But was this a genuine outpouring of empathy or a calculated political move? Champion's history of vocal support for victims, particularly in the wake of the Rotherham scandal, lends credence to the authenticity of her reaction. Her impassioned plea, "Can you imagine if you're a victim or survivor listening to that?" echoes her consistent emphasis on the human cost of these crimes. Yet, in the cutthroat world of politics, even tears can be viewed through a cynical lens. The clash between Champion's emotive approach and Lowe's fact-driven interrogation highlights a fundamental divide in how politicians grapple with sensitive issues. While Lowe's direct questioning aimed to strip away layers of bureaucratic obfuscation, Champion's response suggests a belief that such bluntness might be counterproductive or even harmful to victims. But how united is the Labour Party in its reaction to Lowe's hard-hitting inquiries? The aftermath of the parliamentary session reveals a party at odds with itself. Some Labour MPs rallied behind Champion, praising her empathetic stance and condemning Lowe's approach as excessively harsh. Others, however, have remained conspicuously silent, perhaps wary of wading into such treacherous political waters. The claim that Lowe's language was too rough has become a flashpoint in this debate. Is this a legitimate concern about the tone of political discourse or a convenient smokescreen to avoid addressing uncomfortable truths? Critics argue that when dealing with issues as grave as systematic child exploitation, a certain degree of harshness is not only justified but necessary to cut through years of institutional inertia. Media coverage of the incident has been as divided as the politicians themselves. Some outlets have painted Champion's tears as a poignant moment of human vulnerability in the often cold halls of power. Others have been less charitable, suggesting that her emotional display might be a clever deflection tactic, shifting focus away from the hard questions posed by Lowe and on to the perceived insensitivity of his approach. The tears shed in Parliament have undoubtedly highlighted the deep-seated discomfort surrounding the grooming gang issue. They serve as a stark reminder of the human toll behind the statistics and policy debates. But will this emotional moment lead to meaningful change, or will it be remembered as just another dramatic scene in the ongoing political theatre? The clash between Lowe and Champion in Parliament has exposed the raw nerve of Britain's grooming gang crisis, potentially marking a turning point in how politicians and the public approach this sensitive issue. Historical precedent suggests that such emotionally charged moments can indeed catalyze significant policy changes. The tears shed by Champion and the tough questions posed by Lowe may serve as a catalyst for renewed focus on the grooming gang issue and immigration policies. But will this emotional display and confrontational rhetoric truly lead to meaningful action? Or is this just another day of political theatre in Westminster? The public's growing frustration with perceived inaction on this issue is palpable, and they're demanding more than just tears and tough talk. As the dust settles on this parliamentary confrontation, the question remains, will this be the moment that finally spurs concrete steps to address the grooming gang crisis, or will it fade into obscurity like so many impassioned debates before it?